The time to prepare for a crisis is before the crisis. If you look at Russia, the population is rushing to buy gold. Well, because the ruble is imploding, the price that they're having to pay is a whole lot higher. When would you really have rather get your gold? Now, remember, the system is changing right now. It's already changing. So we would deposit into the account whatever, if it was a CBDC, if it was an electronic form of payment. But I'm thinking at that point, you would go very local, right? In other words, you would actually physically use not necessarily your gold. It depends on how big a purchase it is, but you would use your silver to make that purchase directly. Part of the strategy, frankly, is to have a certain level of cash, as well as your silver, as well as your gold, and that's kind of the order that you would use them in, so that if that happens, you're not impacted.
Yeah.
Like if that happened to me, I'd still be able to pay my salaries, for right. Everybody that works for me, and I would still be able to pay my bills without even actually having to touch, initially anyway,
depending on how long you were locked out.
My silver and my gold. Right. Yeah, it depends. Because those people that were locked out in Canada are still locked out. Essentially, the strategy that we're executing is a strategy of repeatable patterns that have happened every time. And your first line of defense is to have cash outside of the system already. A certain level depending upon your current circumstances. More if you're retired and you're not generating any income, maybe less if you are still working and you're generating income. So it's customized. The strategies are always customized, but you want to have a certain level of cash, and then certainly silver and gold. You hold it, you own it outright. There's no tracking on it, and that's really what you want to do. You want to do it before you need it. And I know that it's, to some it may seem that the things that you're doing are crazy. Well, who cares? I mean, because you're crazy like a fox. If you never need it, so what? You have cash, you have silver, you have gold. Booty hooty, Rudy Manooty. I mean, why is that a bad thing? You have food, you have water, you have energy, you have security, you have community, and you have shelter. You need those no matter what. We are already observing the collapse of the entire system, and it became, it's been happening right along. You remember when I would say, in the beginning, and the reset that is already underway, and I would get a little bit of pushback. Well, you can't say that because it's not really happening. Yes, it is happening. So when you ask me what is likely to happen, well, what do you think about the inflation, right? Because what is inflation but it's rapid depreciation? And the only difference between inflation and hyperinflation is the speed of that inflation. Now, so this is like a huge thing, and also a lot of chaos. So because then you're kept constantly off balance, and hasn't the whole world been off balance since 2020 for the last 2 years? And what have we been doing? We've been lurching from crisis to crisis. What's the next crisis going to be? But it's all a misdirection. So that what you're not really watching is the system collapsing until you get a Lehman moment. And that Lehman moment is already built into the system. Look at all of the stimulus and all of the money and all of the shenanigans, and you're still looking at a market that's collapsing, right? Raising interest rates when all of this stuff, whether it's real estate or it's stocks or it's bonds, when it's all been bought by debt, and you have to roll that debt over, or you have to go in and lock in higher interest rates, which means this real estate market that's already at nosebleed levels, is unaffordable for most people. I mean, it just is. It's unaffordable for most people. By cutting Russia out of the SWIFT system, that means that they can't make payments in terms of dollars. Now, in a tit-for-tat kind of way, they're going to force people to buy, or countries to buy, gas using rubles. It's not fully set up yet, but that kind of positions them to have to buy rubles to support the collapsing currency. And, Russia's gas and oil and the food basket, fertilizer and all of that is a huge part of what the entire world needs to grow food. We are already witnessing this. There is already massive food shortages, and this is going to get worse. So that you have your French President Macron say, well, we're going to give poor people food vouchers so they can still get food. Why? Because when people are hungry and hopeless, they make choices that they would not otherwise make, and that's what topples regimes and systems, because this is a complete con game. So I'm not saying eventually, I'm sorry, Mark, it is already underway, and it has been. The first domino could have already fallen with this Ukrainian war and Russian war, and we just don't see it yet. And by the time we do see it, it's too late to do anything. So, yes, I do agree. Go in and see that, and part of what you'll see is there's typically some level of civil rights movements going on. There's some kind of energy issue going on. There's some kind of war issue that's going on, and the financial system is unstable. So those things are all in place and all playing out right now. This is not an eventual. This is already happening, Mark. What isn't happening is the public is not aware. But you are, because you're watching. What are you going to do about it? I know what I've done about it, and I'm really thankful and grateful that I've done it and I have the ability to do it. But everybody can do something at any level: food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, which is arguably the most important part, because then you have a number of people with a variety of talents that can come together to help each other and shelter. Well, probably what's already happening, which is the loss of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. I think that might speed it up, but they're not going to do an audit because, I think if they audited all of the central banks, they would find that they probably didn't have as much gold as we're being told that they do at any rate. But Brandon, make no mistake about it. It's a huge privilege to have the world reserve currency, since we're the only ones, this is not true anymore, but generally as the world reserve currency, we're the only currency that can create from debt the money that they need to repay debts.